Even though I've had this art studio for the past 4 years of my life, I feel like I never had the chance to properly document this space. I do have photographs and short recordings taken with my phone, and yet I never prioritized documenting it in a way that does justice to its significance. However, I'm glad that I'm getting started now, because I know that one day I will look back at these videos when I'm much older and I can reflect on a significant moment in my life that brought me so much joy and inspiration. I could recall getting the keys to my studio unit back in 2020 during the pandemic. My rationale for getting an art studio at that time was because I felt like I needed to create a separation between my career and personal life. As I was still working as a high school teacher during that period of my life, I was teaching from my bedroom, which felt intrusive to my creative projects. In the beginning, I was mostly using the studio for photography, but eventually got burnt out and stopped pursuing taking photos as a passion. Since then, the only major project I could recall pursuing and committing myself to at the studio had been working on content creation related to my interest in toys. As you can tell, there are many trinkets and plushies on display throughout the studio. I remember when I first moved into the space, I wasn't entirely certain with how I wanted to furnish the studio. However, I eventually decided to purchase a handful of figures to fill up the empty spaces. As the years went by, the collection gradually grew larger in size. Coincidentally, some of the people I share the studio with now are collectors too. Initially, it was just me on a lease, and then my close friend Adrien became the second person to join me. I could vividly remember all of the memories I had with Adrien inside the studio. It would become a routine for us to grab Vietnamese iced coffee and pastries from Lease sandwiches before arriving at the studio for afternoon work sessions. Our evenings were spent eating Wingstop and hanging out with friends. Half of our time was productive and the other half was just fooling around. But the fun had to end, and Adrien left the studio for personal reasons. The next iteration of the studio was when Imran and Creole arrived, and this particular time meant a lot of late night festivities. With many of our friends, including Imran, getting into DJing, the studio had become a central hub for people to stop by to play music, practice, teach, and learn. At this time, other friends got studios in the warehouse as well, and it felt so surreal being able to walk into another space to hang out. But everything is temporary, and folks come and go as need be. However, the current iteration of 324 Stew feels the most significant to me. Like, it has finally developed and evolved into its fullest potential. The current folks a part of this experience with me are Jared, Leo, Alex, Jordan, and VDs. Prior to their arrival, the studio felt vacant and was often unoccupied. Because no one was utilizing the space, I no longer felt compelled or attached to the studio. I debated on whether or not I wanted to continue the lease towards the end of my second year, but a part of me didn't feel like I was ready to let go quite yet. Some days, it felt like a burden to have the studio as I felt obligated to come in because I was paying rent. And other days, I was frustrated with management because of all of the property damages that were being incurred due to leaks caused by rainstorms. But despite those reasons, I held on because I knew deep down that I wasn't ready to let go quite yet. But the studio did have a hibernation period at one point. Eventually, Adrien returned as well, and it felt like every thread that needed to be connected was made. After all these years, all of the time, money, and effort invested into this place, 324 transformed into what you're able to see in this video. The studio wouldn't be what it is today had it not been for the current folks who I share the space with. This idea of leaving has been on my mind for quite some time now, as I feel like being here for 4 years has meant having exhausted so many lessons, experiences, and memories I could possibly have here. I think for me to grow as an artist, I would need to detach myself and outgrow this place. I honestly thought this 5th year would be my last, but after everything that had happened in the past few years, I'm uncertain when I'll be leaving. I also feel like I still have unfinished business here. Connecting my thoughts back to my first point in this video, I feel compelled to fully document this space before I can move on. So who knows? Maybe it means staying for another year or two. It's hard for me to predict the trajectory of my life when there's so much uncertainty. But despite that, I'm glad to have the space and to call it my home. Having figuratively lost my home these past few weeks, I have found 324 to be my replacement. I haven't felt this way about the studio since my first year. The studio has become a place of comfort, not only for me, but for so many people as well. I feel like 324 is a place where my friends and I can come to and detach ourselves from reality, whether it's because of our jobs, careers, or school-related stresses. But beyond those reasons, I feel like the studio exists for us to be our authentic selves and to live our truths. I would say that the studio is ground zero for a subculture that exists in the present moment, a world that has not yet been quite documented, and I want to be the person to capture these moments in order to preserve this place and commemorate what was built between so many people. Throughout the years, the studio had also organically developed into a third space, a location for creatives, fashion kids, and alternative folks to congregate together and socialize, a place where we belong in a world where community spaces have been non-existent. There aren't many places at all that accommodates our niche interests, and that idea connects back to the meaning of DIY. But I digress, as that is a topic to be discussed for another day. The studio is like the ultimate kickback spot, and that was something I had always wanted it to become since the beginning. I would like to believe that one day, when we're all much older, we can look back and remember the fond memories we shared here at 324. A life that we just happened to have the chance to experience. This video is proof that I had once existed, and so did my friends.
Their shades were never